I don't know what it was, but after I beat this game, I just felt the need to take a shower because I just felt dirty. Hello everyone, Davey here with another video game review, and yes, it's another review on a video game that came out some time ago because I've continued to tell certain people, and I'm not angry, I'm not necessarily frustrated, but I do need to repeat myself whenever somebody comes forward and says, why do you keep reviewing old games? Because games are expensive, they take time, and so I wait a little while after a game has come out to finally play it and review it. The only exceptions would be games that I was really anticipating, such as Grand Theft Auto 5 or The Last of Us last year, and it was going to be this year, but unfortunately we're going to have to wait until next year. I was going to go ahead and buy Arkham Knight immediately when it came out and play it and review it, but that's not going to be the case anymore. But here I am to review the reboot for Devil May Cry, or DMC Devil May Cry, whatever they call it. And this is a reboot of Devil May Cry by Capcom, in which they tried to reinvigorate the franchise after so many sequels, and a lot of people didn't really like 3 or 4, I can't remember. And I was never into the Devil May Cry games, so I thought that the reboot was actually kind of a good idea, because I never got into the original Devil May Cry games because so many of them were coming out and they were back in the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era. And sure, we got a new HD collection, which, don't get me wrong, I contemplated getting, but I said to myself, I'd rather go for the reboot and see what that's all about. And so the reboot practically entails the same kind of story as the original did, even though I don't know if it's detail for detail the exact same story, because like I said, I haven't played the original. But the story for this one is that Hell wants to wage war against humans on Earth in order to conquer the world, and it is up to Dante to fight the demons while at the same time fighting, metaphorically, the demons within himself about his past. And based off of the story alone, you can already tell that this is the kind of story that is fit for a video game. And make no mistake, DMC Devil May Cry, the reboot, is, how can I put this? It is the most video gamist of video games that I have played in a really long time. Now, I've always felt a little strange saying that something was a little too much of itself. Like, for example, when I review a comic book movie and I say that the movie was too much like a comic book, or in this case, the video game was too much of a video game, or was very, very video gamey, I feel like that term could be used in two ways. It could be used in a good way or in a bad way. And it's similar to the phrase chewing up the scenery whenever we talk about an actor in a particular movie and you say he or she was chewing up the scenery. You could say that in either a good way or a bad way. It could be a good because they stole the scene that they were in, or it could be bad because they were just hamming it up. And fortunately, I will say that Devil May Cry is the most video game that I've played in a while, in a good way. Because there's no way that you can take this story and make it into either a movie or a novel and not have it be serious, because this game realizes that it's ridiculous beyond belief and therefore never takes itself serious. And because of that, it manages to, I wouldn't say charm us in a way, but manage us to go along for the ride and just have fun without thinking, or I should say overthinking the story or the characters or the development or any of that stuff. Just go in expecting some badass gameplay and cool mechanics and just some good fun. The atmosphere and the tone and the mood, it's all very inflated and bloated and oversaturated. But because the game knows that, it never really... It never really bothered me so much that it was going for this kind of approach with the franchise. Now, like I said, I've never played the original Devil May Cry games, so I don't know for certain if that kind of tone was also present in those original games, but this one definitely did. And like you heard me say, the story is very over the top with a lot of things that can only make sense in a video game, but because the game knows it, it's able to use the story to sell the gameplay and the mechanics you receive as you progress, and the combat, and just give you a good time. But that's not to say that I was sold on every detail that the game offered. There were certain elements that just didn't work for me, whether it be a line of dialogue or a moment that was supposed to be comedic and humorous, but it never really got a laugh out of me, or the very overbearing heavy metal music, because there were moments where, yeah, it fit because I felt badass. I was pulling off all these different moves and I was just killing a whole shitload of demons, and it was a very awesome in the moment kind of moment. But in other instances where they just blared the music really loud when I didn't really feel attached to the moment of feeling like a badass, I felt like it was just a little too much for me. I've never been a huge fan of that kind of music, so it was a little bit of an endurance test to have to go through this entire 12, maybe 13 or 14 hour game while listening to nothing but heavy metal, or dubstep heavy metal, because they mixed it with dubstep and heavy metal. It's just an assault on the ears, and it can only be ignored by being in the moment of feeling like a badass. And just certain elements within the story, in terms of the story writing, I felt didn't really work well for me. There were certain moments where I felt like Dante himself, while overall was likable, especially by the end, and kind of charismatic, there were certain moments in the beginning where he was kind of cliche. He was that typical guy who's like, I don't want any part of this, but then he witnesses something, he sees something that then turns him around like we were expecting him to do, and therefore now he's fighting for the cause and all that. There was just certain things to him as well as the story that didn't work very well. What did work really well for me from beginning to end was the presentation for this game. It's rather gorgeous. The cinematography is breathtaking with an awful lot of saturated colors, but in a way where they really clash with one another. And I know it sounds a little artsy-fartsy, but it's very pleasing to the eyes. And I found the design for Limbo, which is the place that you spend the majority of the game in. And of course, if you don't know what Limbo is, it's that gray area between heaven and hell where demons and angels can kind of coexist without really coexist. Anyways, it's this big elaborate moment jumble, but it's basically the place where an awful lot of crazy shit happens to Dante. And it is in this area, whenever you jump into Limbo, during these particular areas within the missions of the game, that the design really pops out. Not only for the design of some of these places that you have to navigate through, but also some of the creatures that you need to fight. I found them very elaborate and very cool. However, I hate betraying my boy, the PlayStation 3, because I played this on the PlayStation 3. And several reviewers would comment on this, and unfortunately I'm going to have to jump in there with them, that this game is immensely choppy on the PlayStation 3. I've seen comparison videos where it's smooth as silk, not only on the Xbox 360 but also the PC. I don't know what happened, but somewhere down the line their port over to the PlayStation 3 got kind of screwed up, and now the PlayStation 3 version will be forever known as being the less superior version of this game presentation wise, because frequently, and I mean every other cutscene or every other portion of gameplay, the frame rate would suffer an awful lot and become not just glitchy but choppy, like chop 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 chop. And it was very problematic. But the real reason to play this game is of course none other than the gameplay. Feeling like a badass, pulling off different combinations, and just witnessing the spectacle of tearing all of these demons apart. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's very fast paced. At the beginning it was a little button mashy because I felt like I was repeating the same button over and over, and I wasn't really getting anywhere, and I wasn't really feeling that bit of fun. But as the game progresses, they start introducing new enemies that force you to use different weapons as well as different forms of using those weapons in order to kill all these bad guys with the least amount of moves, and therefore stringing together all these combos and making the gameplay a lot more intricate than just a simple button masher. Towards the end of the game, the gameplay becomes rather tough, but it never goes the way of spamming over and over or becoming very unforgiving. And as you progress, you receive all these different upgrades that are actually useful. They actually give you the benefit when you face some of these tougher enemies. And of course, no action game is complete without its completest tasks, such as obtaining all these different keys and unlocking these doors and completing all these other challenges that you can find whenever you go through this particular door, and just all this different stuff that you can go back and play the game after you have beaten it. But it's not the kind of thing, unlike Assassin's Creed 2, there's nothing there to really replay unless you are a straightforward completist. And that's really about it for the main game, because this game is a very straightforward action game where it doesn't really bother with a multiplayer component or doing all these different things to go online and socially interact with people and to gain new experience. It's an action game. It's Devil May Cry. It's ludicrous. It's over the top, but it's exciting, fun, fast-paced, and makes you feel like a badass numerous times throughout its 12 to 13 hour game session. So for that, I give Devil May Cry an 8 out of 10. Now before I wrap up, when I purchased this digitally through the PSN, I actually managed to nab some of the DLC that came with it. It was part of the Ultimate Bundle, so it did come with some of the bonus DLC that they released for this game, and I'm a little mixed about it. First of all, you get these different versions of some of the weapons that you receive in the game. Like, some of them look like they were made out of bone, or out of gold, or out of silver, or like they were made in the time of the samurai. That was a little confusing. And even though they looked cool, I never really felt a difference in how much damage they were inflicting on the enemy. It felt the same throughout for me. You also got the Bloody Palace mode, which it's pretty much a horde mode, wave after wave of enemies, and see how long it lasts. But the main attraction to the DLC would be the bonus story single-player DLC entitled Virgil's Downfall. And not going to go into too much detail about what it is, but let's just say that it deals with the ramifications of what happened after the game ends in terms of the character of Virgil. And there's a couple of things that piece of DLC got really right. For one, you play as Virgil, and he really does feel a whole lot different than his twin brother Dante. His moves are quite different. There's a different approach to them. He's not very bombastic about them, but it's a very balanced learning curve that after some time you feel like you've mastered a whole new character. And unlike the conventional cutscenes that you got in the original game, this DLC actually has some animated sequences where they go for a more of a anime type feel when it comes to their cutscenes, and I really liked it. Granted, I wish they would have splashed in some color here and there, but overall I thought they looked really nice. However, my biggest problem with this DLC is that I don't know what they were thinking, but the writers made everybody, without getting to spoilers, everybody an asshole. I'm not gonna pinpoint who exactly, but it's almost like no character has any kind of arc, or if they do have an arc, it's from going from one particular state to just being a flat out asshole. And I'm like, who am I supposed to root for here? I'm playing as one character, but I don't like him, and there's this other character that I'm fighting, but I don't like this other character. It's very tough to root for anybody within the story of this DLC, and for that, I found it very hard to resonate with the story. And I gotta be honest, I like the story in the original game much better than I did in this DLC. Did it do the same kind of thing that the original game did in terms of selling the gameplay as well as the visuals? Sure, but the original game at least had some likability to some of the characters that they had, unlike here where everyone's a douche. And on top of that, I'm not even sure if the story that happens within this DLC is part of Devil May Cry canon, because should there be a sequel, I don't know if they're even going to be able to consider this piece of DLC as canon and fit it into the story, because it kind of sort of undoes certain things that happened in the original game. So I'm a little flabbergasted by that. So in the end, I think that the DLC is the kind of material that you should get if you're a die-hard Devil May Cry fan and you genuinely enjoyed the original game. But if you did enjoy my review, that was some segue. If you enjoyed my review and would like to purchase the game, be sure to use the link in the description below. Let me know what you guys thought of Devil May Cry, or DMC Devil May Cry, the reboot by Capcom, if you have played it, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.